Tonight's shiur Lilu Nishmat Avi Mori Dov Ber Meir Ben Ruven Halevi Imi Marati Rachel Bat Harav Michael. And this week we are beginning our journey into the Mishkan, which will spend virtually all of the rest of Sefer Shmot. The next 5 weeks, 4 weeks, I take it back, will be spent on the Mishkan, with the exception, of course, of the Chet HaEgel that interrupts in Parshat Ki Tisav. Most of the rest of Sefer Shmot deals with the Mishkan. And tonight I'm going to discuss primarily the Aron, and contrast and compare it with some of the other items that are in the Mishkan. And we're going to try to understand a little bit of the symbolism from the perspective of a number of the Parshanim. So let's put up our screen here and away we go. So at the beginning of the parsha, we are well aware that we, of course, have to build this Mishkan. And the first item we are told that has to be in the Mishkan is the Aron. And the parsha tells, I'm going to briefly read the parsha. You'll see I've outlined a few things here. Firstly, when the Aron is made, it's made of atzei shitim, of shitim wood. It has specific measurements: 2.5 amot length, 1.5 amot wide, and 1.5 amot tall. We're going to contrast those measurements with some of the other measurements as we go through some of the other items. It is to be coated, v'tzipito tozahav Torah, it is to be coated with pure gold. It is to be coated on the inside and on the outside. V'yasito alav zer zahav taviv, it is to have upon it a ornamental, zer is a crown, but really a border around, an ornamental border around it. Then we are told that it has to have 4 rings, 4 golden rings should be cast in it. Yatzak talo arbat habot zahav, cast in the ark are 4 gold rings. V'natatot harbat pavotav, they should be put on the 4 corners. 2 shavot on one side, and 2 of these rings are on the other side. And then we are to make poles of atzei shitim. They are to be coated with tzipito tam zahav. They are to be coated with gold. And then we are to enter the poles. We are to place the poles into the rings al tzalot haron that are on the sides of the ark. Lasedet haron b'hem. These are to be carrying poles that are to be placed, 2 of them, 1 on either side of the ark. V'tabot haron yiyu habadim lo yasuru mimenu. And as far as the ark is concerned, once the poles are placed in the rings, the first time the ark is put together, they are never to be removed. This, by the way, will be in contrast to some of the other poles that we will see with some of the other furniture. And then we are told the purpose of the ark is to place into the ark the edut, the testimony that I will give you, which obviously, as we are well familiar with, the edut are the luchot or edut, the 2 luchot, which were to be put in the Aron. Now, ultimately, not only do the whole luchot get put in there, but the broken luchot are also placed in the Aron. But again, at the time this command is given, we are not sure there is going to be a broken set of luchot, according to Ramban. According to Rashi, yes, we are. And that we discussed that last year, the whole machloket as to whether the whole command for the Mishkan comes after the Chet HaEgel or before. And we're not going to go into that right now. But again, the purpose of the Aron is very clearly to put the luchot in, and it is the first item that is to be built. It is to be covered with a kaporet, which has gruvim. We're not going to get into that right now. I'm going to skip that whole section. And then we get into the chapter that tells us about the table. Yasita shulchan, atzei shitim. We're to make a table also of atzei shitim, of shitim wood. This one is amatayim or kovi amarachbo. It's 2 amot long, 1 amma wide, amma v'cheti kamato, and amma and a half tall. Again, each of these items does have a utilitarian purpose, and perhaps we can very simply say that the measurements are there for the purpose for which the piece of furniture is built, to supply the needs that it has. But we're going to get into a little bit of the parshanim, try and discuss a little bit about that also. That's why it's highlighted in yellow, in gray, the size. This also is to be coated with zahav tahor, and v'yasita lo zer zahav saviv. has the same a gold crown or border around the top of it. Then we are told it has to have a frame around it. And again, arba tabot zahav, 4 rings. Now here, unlike the ark where we were told the yatzaktalo, that the rings were an integral part of the ark, when it comes to the shulchan, we're told the natatat hatabaot. The rings are made separately, but they are put al arba peot on the 4 corners, asheli arba raglav, to the 4 legs of the table. Now the table is like any other ordinary table, has 4 legs on the 4 corners, unlike the ark, which is a box that, according to some opinions, sits on the floor. According to other opinions, it has some legs on the bottom. It's a raised box. We'll get into, we may or may not get into that later on. Again, the rings are around the edges. They are to house the poles, the carrying poles that are used to carry the table. And then we make the badim atzei shitim v'tzipito tam zahav. Now, interestingly enough, here it's v'nisa bam and hashulchan. The poles are used for carrying the shulchan, which seems to imply, and the parshatim seem to take it this way, that once the shulchan reaches the new encampment and the mishkan is set up, the poles are removed. They are there only when the table is being transported from one place to the other, unlike the poles of the ark, which remain in the ark all the time. So that's a very significant difference that parshatim we're going to talk about as we go further. And then we're told we have to make all of the different pieces for the ark: the karot, the plates, the kapot, the spoons, the ksot, the poles, and the dividers that are used to support it. All of these are made of gold. And the purpose of the table, we are told, if we don't skip too far, the purpose of the shulchan is there should always be lechem. There should be this bread, which is called lechem hapanim, translated in English as shoe bread or show bread. But it's basically, it is a non-chametz loaf of bread that is placed on Shabbat. They are placed on the following Shabbat. They are removed and replaced with a fresh set, and then they're distributed a week after they've been baked to the Kohanim to eat. That's the purpose of the shulchan. Then I'm skipping a little bit. The parsha then tells us about all of the curtains and the cover, the roof, which is an embroidered roof, and the poles that form the actual building in which all of this is going to be housed. And we're going to skip till chapter 27 when it says V'yasider hamizbeach. The next item that the furnishing, other than the menorah, which is described, but I didn't want to bring the menorah in because the menorah is solid gold as opposed to the furniture we're discussing today, which is plated wood. The next item we are told about is the mizbeach, which is made of atzei shitim. It is 5 amot orach, the 5 amot rochav. It is 5 amot wide, 5 amot long. Basically, it is a square of the projection of the mizbeach is a square. B'shalosh amot komato, but its height is only 3 amot, as opposed to the 5 amot, which is the size of the top, and the top, or the 5 square amot is the size of the top. Again, here the difference is this is, again, we make karnotav. It has protrusions on each of the corners. They are square protrusions according to the parshanim. They are a 1 amma square box. The menutiano karnotav, which project from the top of the mizbeach. V'tzipito tonachoshet, the entire mizbeach. This is the altar for korbanot. It is to be coated with nechoshet, which again, depending on your translation, is either brass, bronze, or copper. But it is some copper or copper alloy that is used to coat the mizbeach. And then all of the tools that are used are also called kelov tasa nechoshet, are also made of nechoshet, of same material. It then has a netting, Maseh Reshet Nechoshet, which is a netting that is placed around the middle of it. And upon this netting, after it is placed, are placed Arbat Tabot Nechoshet al Arbat Kitzotav. Again, four, again, Nechoshet, I'll translate it as copper rings on the four corners. And then we are told, Vyasita Badim LaMizbeach, we make poles for the Mizbeach, Badei Atzei Shitim, also of same thing of Shitim wood, Vitzipito Tam Nechoshet, they are to be coated with copper. Vuvat Badav Batabaot, the poles are inserted into the rings. Vayua Badim Al Shteit Salot HaMizbeach B'Seit Oto. Again, they are only on the Mizbeach when it is being carried. The poles are not an integral part of the Mizbeach. They are separated after it reaches its new destination. The Mizbeach, unlike other pieces of furniture, was hollow nevuv luchot taseoto. It was hollow pieces of boards, sideboards. Okay, that's in our parsha. There is a fourth piece of furniture, which is again very similar to these three, and that is described at the end of next week's parsha, Parsha Tetzaveh. We are told we are to make another mizbeach, another altar. This is the mizbeach miktar ketoret, on which the incense is going to be offered. Atzei shitim ateaseoto. It is also to be of atzei shitim. This one dimensions are amo or kovi amo rachbo ravua yikeh. Again, the top dimensions are 1 amma by 1 amma. It is also square. Lamatayim komato, however, it is 2 amot tall, unlike the Mizbeach on which the offerings were brought, which was 3 amot tall and 5 by 5. Again, mimenu karnotav, it has extensions projecting from it. Karnotav, again, a square corner. At each corner, there is a square projecting from it. V'tzipito tozahav tahor, it is to be coated with gold. Et gago, its roof, kirotav, its walls, saviv, et karnotav, and the karnim, the corners. The asita lo zerz of saviv. Again, this gets a zerz of saviv. So if we go through the 4 pieces of furniture we've mentioned, 3 of them have a zerz of saviv. 3 of them have a gold border or crown around them. Those are the 3 that are coated in gold. The mizbeach hanechoshet, the one that is for the offering, does not have this crown around it. But we'll, as I said, we'll see the parshatim are going to discuss what these crowns are supposed to symbolize or may symbolize. Again, this has the same thing. Now, interestingly enough, here we only have 2 rings because this is a much smaller piece of furniture. It only gets 2 rings to hold its poles, but it has there are 2 poles to carry it. Laseit otobahem, again, only when it is being carried. Each pole, unlike the shulchan and the Aron and the mizbeach, which had pole on either side, which was held by 2 rings, one on either side of the pole. This one had only 2 rings, 1 for each pole on either side, but the pole went through the ring, only a single ring. How you're supposed to carry it, I think there were 2 people who would hold the pole on either side, but it was too short a piece of furniture, too small a piece of furniture, being only 1 amma square, to put 2 rings and have the pole be stable. So there was only 1 ring that held the pole, and 2 people would be on either side of the pole to carry it. And again, Vitzipito Tam Zahav, the poles were shitim and gold coated. Now, this is one parsha where I am a firm believer in that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so I am going to temporarily stop this screen and put up a different screen, just to show you what some modern day artists and graphics per people think some of these pieces of furniture may have looked like. For the archive, because that's going to be our primary focus, I've taken 2 different views. Now you'll notice that I'm not focusing on the kruvim on top or the ark cover, but I'm focusing on the ark itself. Now you will notice that in the one that is on your left, the poles are on the bottom of the ark. The poles are along the width of the ark, not the length of the ark. And there are small little legs on the bottom of the ark. You will notice that on the left one. You will notice that the one I have here on the right is flat on the floor. The poles are going along the length of the ark, and there are no feet. So those are and they're at the top of the ark. So those are going to be the points that we're going to discuss among the parshanim. Just again, for comparison's sake, a view of the table. Notice the poles there along the width, the length of the table. And even though this probably is not necessarily the way many of the parshanim view the table, this was the only one I could find where the pictures where it actually showed the loaves of bread stacked on top of the table on trays. Most of the other pictures all had the loaves stacked as one loaf on top of the other with no trays, no interspersers. And this is the way the breads were stacked. The breads theoretically were a little bit taller. There was not that much space between one bread and the next. However, this at least gives us a general idea of what it looked like. And I could not find a good picture of the altar, the Mizbeach HaNechoshet, the one that was used for offerings, but I was able to find one that was relatively interesting for the Mizbeach HaNechoshet, HaZahav, the incense altar. You'll notice, first and foremost, that this one has little horns on the corners. These were square boxes, according to most of the traditional interpretations. And as I said, you'll notice this one has 2 rings for each of the poles. And I think most of the traditional interpretations have 1 ring on each pole, which was in the middle of the wall, and that's how the pole was inserted. Again, as I said, for each of these, the Mizbachot and the Shulchan, the poles were only for carrying. For the Aron, they were there all the time. So I hope that helps a little bit with the understanding. I know it helps me when I was learning this always to have pictures, diagrams. I know that the Stone Chumash has a number of very good diagrams, as does the Steinsalz Chumash, if you're looking just to find some diagrams of the whole Mishkan and all of the pieces of the Mishkan. So now I'm going to go back to our other screen here and continue. Okay. So I wanted to focus first, as I said, on the poles and the language the Torah uses for the poles, which I've already sort of a little bit focused on, and the rings. As I said, with the ark, it tells us Yatzak-talo, you shall cast the rings, as opposed to on the Shulchan and the Mizbeach, all of them, it says Vyasita or Ta'aseh, that you shall make the rings. So in case of the ark, the rings were integrally formed with the outside of the ark. They were not made separately and then attached to the ark, unlike the other 3 where the rings were made separately and then attached. I would assume they were attached through melting the metal and attaching it. But in the case of the ark, they were cast together with the ark. Rashi brings down the midrash that tells us that when Betzalel made the ark, he made actually not 1 but 3 arks, an inner one of gold, a middle one of wood, an outer one of gold, and presumably the rings were cast together with the outer one of gold. And this way, by inserting the wood one into the larger outer gold one and then inserting the smaller gold one into the wood one, they were the wood was coated by gold both on the inside and the outside. And again, the dimensions of the ark, which are specifically custom made to fit the luchot, was the size presumably of the innermost one, to make sure that the luchot fit in, because if the luchot didn't fit in, there was no purpose of making the ark. Okay, so having said all that, as I said, the difference in the rings, and I suspect that the reason that the rings are an integral part of the ark, as opposed to the others, it relates specifically to the fact that the badim, the poles of the ark, are betabot haron yiyu badim lo yasiru mimenu, because they are not to be removed from the ark, so it has to be there and stay there. I would have thought hafuch, it would be the exact opposite, perhaps, because if you're pulling the poles in and out, you're more likely to move the rings, and you would possibly have more wear and tear on the rings. However, in in among the Parshanim, when it talks about the whole transportation of the Mishkan in Parshat Bamidbar, where it tells us all the jobs the Levium were assigned to, one of the things it says in the moving of the ark, it says Visamu Badav, that they should put the poles in, which clearly can't mean put the poles in to the rings, because they are to be in the rings the whole time. But what the Parshanim there say, and I didn't bring any of them, I didn't want to quote any of them at this point, but probably we'll have a topic, we'll have that for another time when we talk about Bamidbar. But a number of the Parshanim tell us that the poles, while they were fixed to the ark, they were not fixed within the rings. They had some leeway to slide back and forth within the rings. The problem was the mitzvah was not to remove them from the rings, not that they had to be fixed to the rings. And so there was a little bit of give and take, and presumably that was to help get the ark ready for transport. If you read in Parshat Bamidbar, there was a whole procedure that the Kohanim had to go through to wrap the ark, so that when the Levium came in to carry it, it was already completely covered. They could not see it. All they could see was that where the poles were, that they could pick up the ark and carry it. So perhaps the reason that it was because of that alignment every time that it had to be covered, perhaps was why the ark needed more firmly grounded rings holding the poles. Okay, let's go to the Parshanim. Now that we've finished the Psukim themselves, we go to Rashi as usual. We start with Rashi. Now Rashi just wants to say, if you go back to remember the two drawings, we had one drawing, we had the poles on the bottom of the ark, on the other we had the poles on the top of the ark. Okay, here is Rashi's perspective. Kitar Gumo, he says, Pa'amotav, upon its corners, Zavite, meaning it's corners. Zavit is a corner, and that's what it means where we put the rings. Now Rashi says very clearly, Ubezavit ha'elyon, note that the rings were placed on the top corners, samuch la kaporet, near the place where the kaporet, the cover, was placed. Hayunitunim shtayim mikan ushtayim mikan lerachbo shel Aron. And again, Rashi clearly says that the rings were placed on the length of the Aron, that the poles ran upon the width of the Aron, that the poles ran upon the width of the Aron, that they were separated, the arko shel Aron mafsik ben abadim, that the length of the ark separated between the poles, so there were 2.5 amot between the poles. Why did I need 2.5 amot between the poles? Because the two people who were carrying the ark had to fit between the two poles. So they would stand shoulder to shoulder, facing the ark. And that's the way they would do it. So in other words, carriers of the ark would carry the poles on their shoulders, but they would stand adjacent the ark as they were carrying it. So therefore they had to fit there, and that's why the poles were they were parallel. The poles were parallel to the width of the ark, and the length of the ark separated the poles, is what Rashi says. As we saw in one of the pictures, the other one we didn't. We saw them running along the length of the ark. Okay. Rashi says, okay, let's continue with Rashi here. Now Rashi says, again, very clearly, Lo Yasuru Mimenu, that the poles are not to leave the rings, let olam. That is an eternal commandment, that the poles are always in the ark once they are placed there, period. Okay, so that's, and that, by the way, everybody says. There's nobody who says that the poles were ever removed. Rashbam focuses us again on the phrase v'yatzaktalo, which I already focused us on. That was Rashbam, that the rings of the ark were boltin miguf Aron v'lo mechubaro. They extended from the body of the ark. They were not attached to the ark, made separately and attached to the ark. They were cast together with the ark. And again, al talo achat, they were all on mitzad rachbo. Shari boltin hayubadim litzad ha'echal. that the poles were along the width of the ark, because the length of the ark ran along the length of the Kodesh Kodashim. The width of the ark was along the width of the Kodesh Kodashim, and the poles basically reached the front of the Kodesh Kodashim, so that in theory, the end of the poles pressed against the parochet that separated the Kodesh from the Kodesh Kodashim, so that you could see the indent of the poles on the parochet, so that you knew that the ark was there. So therefore, the length of the ark was from north to south, and the poles went from east to west. That's exactly what Rashbam says. Okay, Ramban starts again. Aron. Now, firstly, Ramban notices, and many of the Parshanim noticed, that when it comes to the ark, we are told v'asu, they shall make. Everything else in the entire Mishkan project begins with the word v'asita, that you shall make. The only time we have the plural used is twice. Once when we are told v'asuli mikdash v'shalchanti b'tocham, the general outline that they shall make a sanctuary, and when it gets to the ark, v'asu Aron, they should make the ark. Okay, and Ramban says yachzor. What does that mean? Al b'nei Yisrael nizkarim l'mala. Who is the they that are making the ark? It is all of Bnei Yisrael. Even though we're going to be told the rest of the whole chapter are all singular verbs. Even though the rest of the chapter says v'tzipita oto, you should code it. V'yatzakalo, you should cast for it. The chulan b'lashon yachid, every other verb in the entire chapter of the ark, with the exception of the first word, is all singular. The only thing that's plural is the first word v'yasu. Ki Moshe keneged kol Yisrael. Interesting enough, Ramban says the reason that once it tells us v'yasu at the beginning that everybody has to be involved in building the ark, the rest, Moshe takes the place of all Yisrael. He is equal to all of Yisrael, and that's why it uses the singular throughout the rest. The Yitakein, however, I think Sheyirmos, this comes to hint. What is the word v'yasud that all of Israel has to be involved? Sheyihu kol Yisrael mishtatfim ba'asiyat ha'aron, that all of the people of Israel have to participate as partners in the making of the Aron. Bavurshu kadosh mishkanei elyon. It is this holy place of where the Shekhinah of the Almighty is going to rest. That's the one reason why everybody has to have a part in it. And that all of them should have the merit, have the merit of the Torah. He quotes the Midrash that says, Ne'ma, again, he quotes the Midrash, says, what is the reason why we have this one plural verb and all of the rest is everything is singular? Rav Yehuda bar Shalom, this is Rav Shalom's, says, that all of Bnei Yisrael should come and be involved in the building of the Aron, that they should merit to understand the Torah and to grow in Torah. The ha'esek and the what is that? What is the practical part of this? She'nadev kol echad kli zahav echad la'aron. Every individual should donate at least one gold object toward the making of the Aron. Oh, if he can't afford that, Yazor Levitalel Ezer Ma'at, he should come and volunteer his efforts while they're making it. Oh, Shiachavnu Ledavar, or he should have in mind something that he should be participating somehow in the work of the Ark. Okay. All right. Now, Ramban, as he does many times, quotes Rashi. Here says, Kitargumo, Arba Zavite, the four corners where the rings were placed, where the four places where the rings were placed was the four corners. And again, he quotes Rashi, says, Avid Hel Yonot, the upper corners. And what does he say? And he says, Kach Perush Rashi. This is Rashi's explanation that there were four rings on the upper part. V'yafa Perush, and he agrees with that. That's the place where the rings were. They were on the top. Avaloya Dati, I don't understand. I understand that he put They're on the corners. I don't understand off the top of my head. It doesn't make full sense to me why they were on the top corner. If you put the corners on the top and the poles on the top, it's heavier to carry. The od kiderach hakavod shehu yet Aron no say v'gavoa lemalo ketefod hakohanim. He says another reason I don't understand why the poles would have been on the top. That doesn't necessarily make sense, because if the poles are on the top, the people carrying it are carrying it at waist level or below, not above them. And if it's the ark, it's the honor of God, it should be carried above the heads of everybody. So when the Kohanim or the Leviim are carrying it, it should be carried head and shoulders above everybody else. So the poles should be on the bottom, not on the top, so that it's being carried by people at their waist level. Okay? Rav Avram said, as Rav Avram here refers to Ibn Ezra, I don't understand how we can translate the word pa'amotav, it's pa'amot, as zaviot, it's corners, because it's never used in that sense throughout the entire Tanakh, he says. Rak regel. Pam, I see, once upon a time, I see the word regel, pam, referring to a leg, a regel. Ma'yafu pamayich, how beautiful are your pamayich, raglei ani, pamei dalim. He brings the two verses where regel is, pam is refers to regel. Al kain, therefore, hitzrachtu lefaresh. Ibn Ezra says, I have been forced to explain ki raglayim hayu li Aron. The ark had legs. It was not flat bottom, it had legs on the bottom. Uperish kiyem shemona tabot. And he explained, Ibn Ezra explained, there were 8 rings. Dalit tachtonot loseit otobahem. 4 on the bottom on these little legs, short legs that we saw in one of the pictures to carry the ark. Those were the lower rings. Elyono liyofi, but it had 4 rings on top for beauty. So it had 4 rings on the bottom with 2 poles, 4 rings on the top. The ain devar of nechonim klal. Raman says, I cannot agree with Ibn Ezra about this 8 ring business. If you want to go and understand, okay, I understand Ibn Ezra had a problem with the fact that palm doesn't mean a corner, it means a regular foot. Fine. Raman says, I can explain that. That's fine. What does that mean then? What that means is that the rings were not at the top of the ark, they were at the bottom of the ark. Like Ibn Ezra wants to say that they had little short legs on the bottom and the rings were on the legs. Ramban says, no, it was flat on the bottom and there were rings on the bottom. The rings were on the bottom, not on the top. Why? But wait a minute, where are the feet? How can it be called feet if there are no feet? The Yikra Hatzedadim Haftachtonim Rigalim. The bottom corners, the bottom sides are called Rigalim, are called feet. Hilashon HaKodesh Yitpost Kol Hatzurot Lidmot Ha'adam. Because in Hebrew, in the Torah way of looking at things, we often refer to top of things as Rosh and the bottom of something as Regel, because we often use human terminology of the human being for top, bottom, side, etc. So it's not infrequent that we usually, let me use Rosh for Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. So we use oftentimes Davar Yona Rosh L'Tzad Tachton Regel. So he says that's fine, and now he's forced to say V'zemet Kachaya, and that must be Shebezavit Hatachtonot Hayuatabar. So what Ibn Ezra says they were on the feet, I agree with him that they were on the bottom, because that makes more sense from the perspective of the honor of the ark being carried above the Kohanim. Therefore, the Aron was carried above. Okay. Then he goes and says, I still don't agree that regel means that palm means regel, but I'm going to skip that for now. Okay. Now all of this is remez lishnei devarim. There are 2 hints to this. Number 1, she'ayu b'hatabot b'zaviot lamata mamash smuchim l'moshe v'Aron. that the tabaot, by using the word regel, and this the whole point of pamotav, of the carriers, that the rings need to be literally almost on floor level, at floor level. So you call arko shel Aron ma'afsik bein shtei tabaot. But the second thing that's important, he says, which is we said before, Rashi says that the length of the entire ark has to separate between the two rings so that there's enough room for the carriers to fit there. Aron arko lemizrach. Again, he goes into the east and west. Okay. We'll stop there with Ramban. But again, Rashi, as I said, they're at the top, Ramban at the bottom. Both Rashi and Ramban agree that there are no legs. It's a flat bottom box. Ibn Ezra wants to say there were feet on the bottom, and the poles were along the feet of the ark. Okay. Now, Kleakar is going to talk a lot about the whole symbolism of the ark, which we didn't see a lot of in the above. But I want to bring down Kleakar because he's going to go very deeply into the symbolism of a lot of these different nuances. But first, before he does that, he brings a very interesting quote, which I've sort of paraphrased a number of times, but since I'm bringing him down, I thought we'll read it. In terms of all of the works of the Mishkan and all of the utensils that are built and all of the details, that all of the details are there. Take them for what they are. We can't add to the details. We can't subtract from the details. They're there because if they were something else, we'd ask why they were something else. So don't bother worrying about the details. They're there because they were needed for the builders to know what to build. However, many of the parshanim have tried to understand a little of what these things allude to. Many of the parshanim have tried to find hints to things that are either hidden or open or obvious. It is hard to imagine that the Torah gives us all of these details simply for no reason whatsoever. Therefore, many of the parshanim have decided to try to figure out some symbolism of what these things mean. Each one brings, based on their perspective, what they think the symbolism is. Afilu, and he says, even Rashi, even Rashi, who takes everything at face value, takes everything at its literal meaning. Nonetheless, there are times there are times where even Rashi will find something that so blatantly requires some type of illusion, some type of symbolism, he will not hesitate to do it. Even when it comes to the altar, he talks about why it's copper plated, because nechusha of brazenness, which is called nechusha, which is close to nechoshet. So since the altar comes to atone for brazenness, therefore it has to be bronze coated or copper coated. Similarly, when they reached a limb where they had 12 wells and 70 date palm trees, again he says that there's a reason why it tells us there were 12 and 70, because it corresponds to the 12 tribes and the 70 elders. So again, even Rashi sometimes finds Ramazim. So therefore, Kleakar says, I'm going to try to do the best, see what I can come up with here. Okay, so now we're going to go through some of the things. Okay, the Terumah, before I even start, he wants to start with the following things. We find Shlosha Rashi Kelim. There were three primary vessels, items that we have. Asher Lev Nasa Zer Zahav. We talked about the fact that three pieces of furniture had a golden border or crown around them, and they are the Aron, the Shulchan, the Mizbeach, as we talk about. The Chazal Amru, and already in the Gemara, already explained the purpose of these three crowns or borders. Shem Keneged Shlosha Ketarim. These correspond to three different crowns that are mentioned in Pirkei Avot, and they are Keser Torah, Keter Kuna and Keter Malchut, the crown of Torah, the crown of the Kohanim, the crown of royalty. Okay, now if one would look carefully and read, these three utensils have one thing that differentiates them simply in terms of their measurements. What are they? In the ark, all three dimensions are part amot or half amot. They're not a full amot. It's 2.5 by 1.5 by 1.5. It's all half amot. Hamizbeach, however, when it came to the altar, both, this is true of the copper altar, but here he's talking about the golden altar. Mizbeach hayu kol amotav shlemot. The mizbeach was 1 amot by 1 amot by 2 amot, all whole amot. So there's a difference between the ark, which is all half amot, the mizbeach, which is all full amot, and the shulchan. And guess what the shulchan is going to be? 1 and 1. It's going to be part. Now shulchan hayu miktatan shivurot, part were broken, miktasan shlemot, and part were whole. Halo davarhu. So this is the reality, and we're going to try to understand what this means. That's what he's going to get into. I think what this is to hint at, okay? The Fisha Amro Chachamim, because we are told by wise men, the Malot Habeit Lamala Mimcha. When you are ascending, you should always look above you. When you're trying to raise yourself spiritually, don't look for role models below you, look for role models above you, so that you'll always be aspired to you'll see, I could be better. Not, I'm better than somebody else, but I could be better. So there's something, he's not complete because there's somebody who's got something that he doesn't. He hasn't reached the level of his friend. And he will come through his jealousy of him, Yosef al shleimut chachmato, and through his jealousy of this other person's spiritual standing, he will strive harder to grow in his wisdom. As we learn in the Gemara, as we learn in Mishlei, when people who are learning are jealous of one another, that causes them to work harder and to increase learning. However, so that's what the ark alludes to. Everything is half. You're always looking to complete yourself. And that's because the ark represents Torah, represents striving for Torah. When it comes to the physical world, which is again represented in two of the other things, when it comes to honor and wealth, always look at somebody who's below you. Through that, you see, if you always look at a person who's poorer than you, a person who is less honored than you, then you'll be happy with the honor you've got. You'll be happy with the wealth you have. Because you see, you'll see, hey, okay, maybe there's somebody better than me, but that's not important. What's important is I'm okay. I'm where I am, and I'm okay with that. And this is exactly what the Chazal tell us. Palel. When you are in tefillah, you take einav lamata. Your eyes should be downward. V'libo lamala. Your heart should be focused upward. Okay. That when you are praying for the needs of your soul, you got to look upward. When you're striving to grow spiritually, look for people who are above you. And you should pray to Hashem to grant you wisdom. Those are the prayers you should be focusing on, not so much worrying about the prayers, oh Hashem, give me parnasa and give me wealth and all these other things. You should be focusing on that. And where do we see that? Who do we see that from? The wisest of all men. Shlomo. Lo shalmim Hashem kim shetein lanu leiv shomei avenaim araot v'chamudot haguf hameshushot yitain b'mishu l'mata mimenu. Okay, I'm sorry. Leiv shomei. Even Shlomo, when he has this famous dream and he asks God, says, what do you want me to give you? He says, just give me an understanding heart to understand what's going on in the world. And that's more important to be able to grow in wisdom and understanding and knowledge is much more important than all of the physical things we have in the world. When it comes to looking at the physical world, always focus on somebody who's lower than you. The az yismach bechelko, the lo yivakesh al ribuy osher, and he will not look for wealth, as Shlomo says in Mishlei, Rash the osher al titanli. I don't need to be super poor. I don't want to be super rich. I'm very happy with what you've given me, that whatever you've given. Okay. The alkane. So therefore, how you call Amor Aron Shivurot, or which call him Yibn Asher Shkilu Chasim in Hashem Elachachma. Mitzvah Nod Adayin Lamalot Chesrona. Okay. So therefore, the ark is all half, part ark, part amot, to hint to you that when it comes to wisdom, you're supposed to focus higher because you're missing something. He called Amor Chaser Moral Davar Chaser Tzorch Shimalu Chesrono Kol Ikar. He says there were three different types of chachma. I'm going to skip that. Okay. The key here is realizing that no matter how much we understand Hashem, we haven't even scratched the surface yet. That we have so much more to go, and therefore all the amot of the Aron, which hint at our awareness of Torah, our awareness of Hashem, our awareness of wisdom, all of these are in half amot. And each of these is to cause us to focus on that. Aval HaShulchan, when it comes to the table, Hamirameh is Leketa Malchut, which hints at the crown of royalty, the physical world. All of the physical needs that we have that HaKadosh Baruch Hu grants us through his table, from their gift, we get a gift, or if you will, shirayim from Hashem's table that propel us, that keep us going physically. There, the Amora Ketzachim Shleimot Ki Kol Maskil Yismach Bechelko. You should be happy with your portion. However, if that's the case, they should all be full. So you should be happy with your full lot. But why be Yidmo B'Nasho Kilo Yesh Lo Kol? You have to imagine that you have everything you have, that you're not missing a single thing in the physical world. And we find similarly Yaakov Avinu, when he talks to the he says, Yesh li kol, I have everything I need. Doesn't matter, I don't have everything in the world, but I have everything I need. Amnam, however, Kitzatam Hayu Shvurot, however, why is what? So that's why they're all full, to make us feel like we have everything. However, one of them is not, Lo roch lo yashlim adam ta'avato mikol vikol, that he should not fulfill all his desires. He shouldn't be chasing after fulfilling all of his desires. He should not be so focused on the physical world. He has to control his desires in the physical world. That's what is, the half midah of the table is to remind us that we have to break. It's a broken measure, because we have to break our Yetzer Hara for going after all the things of this world. That's why we have the word shvira associated with lechem, shivru lanu me'at ochel, in many cases. Okay. Now, when it comes to the Mizbach, where am I at? Far here ahead. Of a Mizbach HaKtoret, when it came to the offer where the incense was brought, how you call them out of shleimim, v'chein mizbach olah, and similarly with both mizbachot, the measures were all full. Ki inyan shnehem, the purpose of both of these is lahashlimet ha'adam hechaser mitzad ma'asav. The person who has had a shortcoming in his deeds comes to bring an offering to Hashem. That's why they have to be full. We are trying to fill ourselves up of the shortcoming that we have created through our deeds. Person who comes to seek forgiveness, atonement, is filling the void that he has created. The Mizbach Olah is to get to bring physical kapara, physical atonement. Because we offer, the offerings are animals, and we bring their bodies. is to bring atonement for the soul. The fact is, when we sin, we have diminished our body and we have diminished our soul. And so we need atonement for both. Mizbach Olah comes to bring atonement for the body or to fulfill the void in the body. The Mizbach HaKetoret, the incense, comes to bring a kapara for the neshama. And the spirit of Hashem that should be uplifted like the smoke from the Ketoret arises. The Alkain, therefore, all of its measures were full. Okay, now he's going to get, now that he's had this little digression about these three crowns and the three differences of the three measurements, he's now going to get into describing a little bit about the altar. Again, he's going to start with the same thing we've seen already in the previous. Why here is the asu, the plural, as opposed to everything else is asita in the singular? Amar Torah hakol yavo asku baron kadeshu kulam chelik b'Torah hiketer Torah hefker lakol. Because the crown of Torah is available, it's open, it's ownerless. Anybody can come and claim it, unlike the other two crowns, which we're going to see. Another interpretation, the Torah is a tree of life to those that hold on to it, that grab onto it. It doesn't say to those that study the Torah. Remes, this is to hint, not just to those that learn Torah is the Torah Eitz Chaim, but even to those who support it, those that strengthen those that are learning Torah. Not everybody is mentally able or physically able to spend all their time in learning Torah. However, everyone can achieve a portion in the Torah. Even if he is not able to learn Torah, he can certainly strengthen those that are learning Torah, whether through supporting them or any other, whether supporting them physically or supporting them emotionally or intellectually or mentally. Like we know, the famous partnership of Yisachar and Zvulun, where Yisachar sat and studied Torah and Zvulun provided for his financial needs. Okay. Therefore, the Aron is Atzei Shitim. Ki mitzad yod Aron ha'etz ha'meramez al ki eitz chayim hil machazikim ba. Al kena kol yichol lasota. Everybody, since everybody can support those that learn Torah, everybody has to have a portion in building the Aron, and that's why it says v'asu. And it's possible that was what Rabbi Yochanan was alluding to in the Gemara when he says that the Talmid Chacham should be supported by the people of his city. If you have somebody who's a great Talmid Chacham, he should derive his support from the people of the city. Okay, then he talks about the fact that the Aron, we are told, unlike the Shulchan and unlike the Mizbachot, which are only coated on the outside, not on the inside, the Ark has to be coated both on the outside and the inside. And of course, the question is, okay, what is that supposed to tell us? He says, okay. Okay, now, okay. He says that the inside ark coating refers to the hidden Torah, and the outside refers to the available Torah, the nigla, the revealed Torah. And similarly, he says, similarly, he talks about people. We have gold, not everybody is the same inside and out. And this is to allude that when it comes to Torah, we have to be the same inside and out. It's also interesting that the inner, why didn't it just made of gold? If it has to be gold inside out, why didn't we just make it of gold? Why did it have to be wood? Why do we need the wood? Because the wood hints that wood comes from trees, which is a growing thing that provides fruit, to hint that learning Torah bears fruit. Those that support and uphold the Torah will be provided with the fruit in the world to come of the reward for their their activities. This is something everybody is looking forward to. So therefore, okay, I will comes to hint at the fact that ain't kol adam shavim b'zeh, that not everybody is the same when it comes to their inside and their out. Miyuchad leMoshe. Why it says vitzipita in singular? Because it's referring to Moshe, she'anshi segula, and other people of great stature, asher ke'erko l'kach nemer vitzipita, because their inside is the same as their outside. They are the same inside and out, and that's why the hinting, the illusion of the gold in and out comes from in the singular. Okay, and he goes through again a lot of things talking about how our inside and our outside have to be similar. We have to focus on both of these, and I'm going to stop here because Clark continues for a long time. We'll be here all night if we keep going. So I'm going to stop here. But again, I think that these are, again, all of these are very powerful and important lessons when it comes to that the ark is to allude to in its construction, the fact that Torah is accessible to all. If you can't sit and study Torah, you can sit and support those that are. If you can't do that, you can give them intellectual support, or you can live Torah. You can live a Torah life. That's also part of upholding the Torah. So all of these are hinted to. Again, the concept of being honest in our dealings, that we shouldn't be hiding things internally. Also alluded to the fact that it has to be coated on both the inside and the out. The different crowns alluding to different things. And again, the practicality, the important thing, I think also one thing we didn't get to, which gets to a little bit later, the fact that the poles are always in the ark is to remind us that Torah is something that is an eternal and ongoing, and every day and every time we always have to be aware of Torah in our lives, no matter what we're doing, no matter where we are, we never take a vacation from Torah. And I think that's the key lesson from the poles always being there. Once they're placed there, once we got the Torah, it's part of us forever. And we have an obligation as the Jewish people to always remember that. And when we are able to remember that and focus on growing, as again, the half Amo allude to, growing in Torah, then we will be able to influence others to grow in Torah, to grow in observance, to grow in their awareness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and ultimately we will merit to once again rebuild the Beit HaMikdash and be able to see what the Aron really did look like and what the Shulchan really did look like, because we will be privileged to build them all again and use them all again. Thank you all. And at this point, I open up to questions, comments, and feedback for anybody who is interested in commenting. Anybody? No questions, no comments. Okay. Have a good rest of the week. Chodesh Tov, Mishnichnas Adar Marbi B'Simcha. So everybody should have a wonderful, happy, and joyful month. And bless you. We'll see you soon. Yitраot.